All right, welcome into this 12 News Connected special. Glad to have this platform on stories like we're about to discuss here. We had sort of a joint reporting operation here. Dylan Domingue, one of our investigators, TJ Cleland, our sports director. I'm Jacob Albrock, by the way, and we're going to discuss a story they were working on. And this is an interesting one because they're in very early stages of this, but you know, at a bird's eye, Cliff's Notes version, state colleges here, the athletic directors are lobbying a little bit to state lawmakers in the very beginning stages to perhaps get a little money to help them fund athletic programs. Now, on the surface, people have some really big reactions to that. But as we dig in a little bit, it is a little more nuanced maybe than the general thing of people saying, hold on a minute, we don't need to be funding that. There's some nuance here. So where did this start, TJ?
So basically, I didn't know this part of it. They'd been talking in the State House until last legislative session, and then it happened this year as well. We saw them in there, and it was basically just a question of why are the athletic directors there? Then we kind of learned more that it has something to do with funding, and as we dug more into it, just reached out to athletic directors, just explain to us why you were there, what you were really asking for, and they basically just talked about examples that they've seen elsewhere, and there's a study about how much revenue they bring to the state of Kansas, and that was really all that it was. That's all that meeting was just saying, here's this, no further asks, requests, bills drawn up. It was just a conversation, digging into it more, we kind of see what the motives are of, what the end goal kind of is for this kind of thing.
And as we dig in a little bit, Dylan, imitation's the greatest form of flattery. We see in some other states some things happening. We also see in the state of Kansas something like this was just done to get the Chiefs lured over here. So with that, we're not trying to jump to any conclusions on what these athletic directors are trying to accomplish, but they're not doing something unprecedented.
It's looking at any funding option. That's the biggest thing. I think it's important to know as well, the funding options are not to fund the rosters. They're to fund the athletic departments for different needs. It could be, new athletic fields. It could be to upgrade facilities, things like that. But as you said, there are other states taking measures right now, and I think every state's kind of looking at one another to see what are they doing, what is something we can take from that, because every state's doing something a little bit differently. So you've seen it, if you've probably been on social media, schools like UCF, Houston, are proudly promoting that their state does not have income tax. So when they're talking about NIL, there's no income tax there, and if you're in a state that doesn't, that's a pretty big get. Other states are trying to navigate through that. So Arkansas last year recently passed legislation that would say that they do not have, that they exempted NIL off their income tax. Other states are looking into a bit of that as well, but more specifically, when we look at North Carolina, about 20% of their revenue that gets from their sports betting companies goes back into universities, public universities. So it's split between 13 different universities. And as you see here on your screen, in 18 months, so that's just in a year and a half in North Carolina after sports betting was legalized, more than $41 million was raised through that revenue fund. So that means more than $3 million was given to different schools in North Carolina to, again, help with those athletic facilities. And again, this is not something that Kansas has looked at specifically, but these are just options that other states are looking at as well and considering what could be done potentially in Kansas. And as you said, we've already seen what sports betting revenue has done here for this state.
Right. And it's been put in different uses in different ways. Some of those ideas right there are interesting. State income tax, listen, that's true for anything, right, that those states can boast. So that one will be interesting to watch. It's the revenue generating. Sports betting, a lot of the things that people bet on here are the performances of these programs. So that one to me is a little more interesting and may have a little more of an appetite.
Yeah, it's sports betting kind of has a black eye. It was taboo before, it was legalized, and that was kind of always the devil's advocate part of that. And, the argument to bring it to Kansas is because it can do this for us, that can be used for blank. And this is something that, they're kind of pointing out to say, like, if this is something that is possible, this is something that's happening in North Carolina, potentially that can happen for this. You talked about the Chiefs. Speaking to the athletic directors, it wasn't quite the fact of, like, there's money on the table and we need to go get it, but it was more so the fact of, like, they're willing to do things to bring teams from Missouri to Kansas on the professional side. What about the teams that were in Kansas that drive what they say is $1.5 billion of revenue in 2025, every single year, basically? And so the premise of all this stuff, and I'll play the devil's advocate on the other side for the people that have the reaction that you see when you see state money along with collegiate athletics, with NIL and the way that everybody thinks about that, is that if this isn't so much the fact, based on what they've said, of them being greedy that they need more money to be better. It's more so saying, like, this is what we can do for you when we're good. If you invest, it could grow. And that's the argument they're making.
And we've already seen what some of that sports betting money could be used for. Again, it helped attract the Chiefs to the state of Kansas.
Right.
The governor's office made a post when the Chiefs announced that they were going to move across state lines, that there was a fund created called the Attracting Professional Sports to Kansas Fund. It was established dedicating the revenue from sports betting to this specific fund. So it was just for this specifically. So part of that public funding that they talked about to get the Chiefs over came from that. In a report late last year from the Kansas Reflector, it said that that fund specifically had $26 million. So again, it's a good bit of money generated from sports betting that we've seen be
That's
used.
already been earmarked.
Yes.
Okay, well, the Chiefs have already come over. We see the appetite for the Royals waning. Is that money already earmarked for something else? Do we know that yet?
We don't know that yet. And so the Royals, of course, still in play on both sides of the state line. So again, that fund specifically for attracting professional sports teams. So the Royals would still be technically in play when it comes to that. But again, if the Royals decide to stay in Missouri,
right,
and at that point the Chiefs are already dedicated to move to Kansas, we know that money could be generated there. What else could that money be used for if the state legislature decides to relook at that and say, okay, we know we got the Chiefs, that can help pay off a stadium, help pay off the practice facilities as well. Could that money be used if states want to, or if schools in the state maybe want to look at that funding option? Again, these are not, nothing of this is confirmed. The state has not passed any legislation or picked up any bill introducing anything, but it's just all options that other states have looked at that could be potential options here in Kansas.
Again, preliminary, as there's no bill or request, as I said, and asking the athletic directors of, like, what do you want to happen? It's basically like, we don't know. We don't know what we want to happen. We just want to show the facts of what we know and kind of leave that up to them to say, like, here's what other states have done, but they're not going to come out and say, we want this one, because that eliminates the 5 other options. As we're saying, it's so early in this. I imagine as we move into further legislative sessions, there will be, the narrowed path towards one of them. But right now, it's basically just showing examples like we're showing you.
Priority one would have to be the money generated through these programs, I would think, from the athletic directors. Here's what we can prove to you that we're generating. I mean, we can all say all day long it's not going to pay, but we know how the world works now. The athletic departments have less money because they're using money and funds now that players are being paid and compensated. So they just need money in the coffers to help some of these other sports. That we know. Like, we know they can say where it's direct, doesn't really matter. It's all coming from one place to help these athletic programs, which their budgets just got tighter. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah. It's more expensive than it's ever been. Revenue sharing makes it hard on these universities, and it was always the argument of why paying players was going to be hard, because it's a free market. There's no real guidelines right now, and that's what all the complaints are. Something that we talked about in the story is that, there's reports that football teams were spending $30 million on a single roster in 1 year. And for a team like KU and K-State, that they've got a lot of money. Do they have that kind of money? That's what the hard part of it is.
Well, they're going to have to show, I would think, right, that it's a worthy investment. Like, you only spend $30 million if you're going to return that, unless it's just a private entity giving a bunch of money out. What I don't think the state would have any appetite for is giving a bunch of money that doesn't have a return on investment. Right there, the Chiefs.
That's the hard part.
The Chiefs had a return on investment that was, that was calculated. Whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, it was calculated and presented that way. They're going to have to prove to the state that we're going to get you a return on that investment.
And I think that was a message from the athletic directors that they said, it's, hey, we generate X amount of dollars right now for the state. If you invest in us, we're going to have a product that people are wanting to go see. And so in return, it'll generate that money
better.
again.
It will, not just in athletics, but across campus. I would imagine that's the pitch.
That's the whole argument. And as Kevin Saul said in the story, said again last night on Sports Sunday, which you can see up on our 12 News Connected app as well, that the number is $1.5 billion in 2025. if they weren't as good as they were, that number could very well be 1.2, $1.1 billion. And that's kind of what it is that, this can help sustain success. Everybody talked about the transfer portal and players leaving to go get more money. That could help you sustain your success. That could potentially help you invest, grow your success, thus growing the revenue. That's the athletic director's argument.
Yeah, and they've got a lot of work to do, a lot to prove there. Again, go check out that story, kwch.com, to watch the story itself. You can watch that interview with Kevin Saul here on 12 News Connected. We're going to do more of this as we do some of these deep dives and just kind of dig in a little bit. If you have any questions on it, you can always reach out to the newsroom. We can react to you guys directly. We appreciate it. Dylan, TJ, nice work.
Thank you.
Let's do this again soon. And this is certainly a story we're going to be following for you here on 12 News.